Are you going to introduce yourself?
Okay.
Oh, we're recording. I'm very sorry.
Not a- All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today with this webinar. This webinar is being conducted by the Cash Campaign of Maryland. CASH stands for Creating Assets, Savings, and Hope. We are a statewide nonprofit that works with different organizations from across Maryland to help improve the financial stability of working families. My name is Sue Rogan. I am an accredited financial counselor and the Director of Strategic Partnerships with the Cash Campaign of Maryland. A little information about the Cash Campaign's programs and services that we offer. We offer financial coaching and financial planning, so an individual can work with a certified financial planner who is donating their time to our organization to help people create a comprehensive financial plan. We also have financial coaches available to work with individuals one-on-one for a number of sessions to help them work on their financial goals and help them succeed in achieving those goals. We also conduct advocacy, which means that we work with elected officials to help them understand what are the needs of the people that we are working with. So the image in the center stands for legislation that we worked with different groups together to pass to cap the interest rates on payday loans. So in Maryland, a payday loan interest rate is now capped at 33%. Another service that we offer is free tax preparation. So families who earn under $57,000 in 2020 can have their taxes prepared for free at one of our sites or at one of our partner sites. In addition, we conduct financial education webinars, which are hosted on our website, www.mdcashacademy.org. And that website is meant to be a resource for consumers to find fact-based financial education that is not selling any products or services and is a resource to consumers because we know it's difficult to learn about money. During the pandemic, all of our financial education classes are webinars. We have a lot that have content specific to the financial ramifications of the pandemic. We also have content in Spanish. And as with this webinar, we are recording the webinars that we are posting and putting them on our Cash Academy website so that you can look at them when it is convenient. We also have content on our website that is, again, specific to resources and programs due to the pandemic. And all of the resources here are meant to reduce the financial impact of the pandemic. So we want to jump into the content for this video, which is what is happening around dealing with debt or creditors, and specifically what's happening during this pandemic. So Governor Hogan's executive order placed a ban on vehicle repossessions. So the lender of the vehicle loan cannot repossess a car until the executive order is lifted. The CDC, or Center for Disease Control, has placed a ban on rental evictions if the person can prove that the inability to pay the rent is related to COVID-19. There is also a current ban on foreclosures. The ban on utility shutoffs if a consumer is unable to pay their utility bill has, however, been lifted. But we want to make sure that you know that all of the utilities are accepting payment plans from consumers, and it is important to contact the utility to enter in the payment plan so that a shutoff will not occur. There are also listed on our website assistance programs if you're having difficulty paying your utility bills. Some other protections that are in place due to the pandemic is there's a suspension on federal student loan payments and interest until January 31st of 2021. Please note this only applies to federal student loans, not private student loans. In addition, the collections and garnishments on federal student loans, so if they are not being paid or if they've been in default, all of that activity is suspended until January 31st. If you received a stimulus check, that stimulus check could not be garnished by any debt collectors other than Maryland Child Support. If you received a stimulus check and money was taken out of it by any other collectors, please contact the Attorney General's office to file a dispute. In addition, the Maryland state government executive agencies have suspended collections during this time. So, a little background on the debt collection industry. It is a big business, and there are laws that are there to protect consumers from debt collection agencies who may be engaging in illegal debt collection practices. So, the way that a debt is defined is the debt owned by the original creditor and it's been assigned to a collection agency. So, the original creditor, let's give an example of a hospital. Sometimes original creditors are not in the business of collecting debt. So at some point, after they have tried to collect the debt for a certain period of time, they will either assign it to a collection agency and they still own the debt, or they may sell it to a debt collection business or an agency or a company. And if it is sold to a debt collection agency, it generally is not sold for the original amount of the debt. The Federal Trade Commission conducted research several years ago to find out the average amount of money a debt collection agency buys debt from the original creditor for. That amount of money is 4 cents on the dollar. That means the company, if they collect that entire dollar of debt, they make 96 cents. So you can see why this is big business and why debt collection companies exist. So some of the rules that are in place by the federal government and by federal legislation is the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. And that defines someone as a debt collector if they regularly collect debt, meaning they are in the business of collecting debt. So the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act does not apply to the original creditor. This law only applies to businesses who are defined as debt collectors. And if you've had debt incurred because of a business that you have operated or you are the owner of, business debt is also not covered under the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. So some of the rules that are in place with this federal legislation is that debt collectors cannot harass a consumer. That means they cannot call 50 times a day. They cannot engage in practices that the consumer feels are harassing to them. They are not allowed to lie to the consumer. An example of lying to a consumer would be calling the consumer and saying, "The police are down the street to arrest you if you don't pay this debt right now over the phone." Police are not going to engage in that practice for the debt collector. So that is a lie and that is prohibited by federal legislation. They also have very limited ability to contact other people about the debt that you may owe. They are allowed to contact friends, family, or an employer to ask for contact information for you. They are not allowed to discuss the debt with your friends or family. And if they are calling you at your place of employment, if you tell them to stop calling at your job, they are supposed to stop calling. In addition, they cannot add interest or fees to the debt unless the contract actually allows for that addition. So it's important to know what the original contract contains in order to make sure if the debt collector is following the law. So if you have a debt collector calling you, it can be very stressful, and I want to make sure you know the tips to be able to deal with them and to reduce any stress. So when they're calling, you can be polite, but you also want to be firm. You don't want to engage in a heated conversation or get upset. You really just want to ask them what is their name, the company's name, perhaps the person calling you, their name as well, and what is the phone number for this company. And that is all you're going to ask them. Everything else is going to not be talked about. You do not want to discuss this debt over the phone unless you are placing the call to the debt collection agency yourself. And there are some reasons for this. One is there are a lot of debt collection scams where people are calling and you absolutely do not owe that debt to them whatsoever. For example, if you receive a phone call claiming to be the IRS saying that you owe back taxes, that is a scam. It is not the IRS calling you. So you do not want to discuss this debt over the phone, again, unless you are placing the call to the debt collection agency. If you would like the debt collection agency to stop contacting you, there is a letter, and this is a sample of it from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that's called a cease contact letter. So you are telling the debt collection agency to stop contacting me. You may be in a place of where you are not able to repay this debt, and it is just causing constant strain or stress by getting phone calls or by getting letters from a debt collection agency. This is the consumer protection law that helps you stop that contact and just move on with your life and let this debt go for however long it needs to be let go. So if you need this letter, it's available online. You can fill in the information that relates to you. You're going to print it out, send the letter, but keep a copy for your record so you can prove you sent that letter. If you're able to send an email, send the email, but again, store that in one of your folders and make sure that you can access it if the company continues to contact you. If they do keep contacting you, once you have sent this letter and you can show proof that you have sent it or the email, you're able to file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, and they actually can take action against the debt collection agency for violating the federal protections that you had to cease that contact. So some further tips on dealing with debt collectors. There is a legal term called reaffirming the debt, and that is something that you do not want to do. What that means is if a debt collector calls you over the phone and you say, "Oh, I know I owe this debt, but I don't have the money right now to repay it. I'll get to you when I can." You have done the term reaffirming the debt. That means that you have agreed that, yes, I do owe this debt. And one of the reasons you do not want to do this, even though you may personally feel, yes, I do owe this debt, is that that reaffirmation will start the time clocks over again in terms of how long it can be on your credit report and potentially how long you can be sued for this debt. So that's why you do not want to take that step. If you feel like this is debt that you legitimately owe, there are other processes and steps to take, but you do not want to commit over the phone to a debt collection agency that you owe that debt. Another thing to consider is don't let any kind of letter or phone call or any other communications by a debt collection agency stress you so much that you move that creditor to your urgent or I have to pay this because you need to do other steps first. If, however, there is a lawsuit that is pending and you have received papers that the lender is going to take you to court, that does need to go on the urgent list. And not necessarily for repayment, but at least for handling the lawsuit. Whether you attend the court hearing yourself or whether you ask for any assistance from some of the pro bono law agencies such as Legal Aid or Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. So if there is a pending lawsuit, that takes high priority. But other than that, getting communications from a creditor is not on your urgent list until you have done the steps that we're going to talk about in just a minute. Again, be very careful of debt collection scams. There have been an increase in these scams due to the pandemic. And if you're getting harassing phone calls, or if the debt collection agency is lying to you, if they are doing some of those actions that we have said is prohibited, make sure you complain because there are agencies that take action against these debt collection companies in order to stop them from violating the laws that they are registered or they are regulated by. So this is resources to you if you need to file a complaint against a debt collection agency. The Federal Trade Commission or the FTC has a complaint assistant website. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also takes complaints. And in Maryland, we have the Maryland Attorney General Consumer Protection Division that also investigates complaints about debt collectors, along with the Department of Labor, the Commissioner on Financial Regulation. So both state agencies can assist with these complaints. If you happen to live in Howard County or Montgomery County, they each have a local Office of Consumer Protection who also will investigate these complaints. So the State Collection Agency Licensing Board is a part of the Maryland Department of Labor. This is the agency that license collection agencies, means they need to be registered with the state in order to conduct debt collection in the state. And this agency also has responsibility for the licensing and they handle complaints against debt collection companies. So we talked about the need to do some steps before you decide to repay debt. One of the most important things you need to do before you decide to repay debt is create your spending plan, make sure that you have enough money to cover your living expenses, and that you have some emergency savings in case something happens. Then, if you have additional money and you're able to start addressing past debt, it is critical to take the step that is called verifying debt. Debt collection agencies often do not get the documentation behind the debt. They may literally get an Excel spreadsheet with names and contact information and the amount of debt owed, meaning they do not get contracts. They do not get statements of what amount has been paid in the past. They're literally going and contacting people and trying to get that full amount of debt, although it may not be accurate. So it is very, very important, not only in case they don't have the documentation, but in case there have been mistakes in the amount of debt that they're claiming is owed, that the step to take to write a letter to ask for verification of the debt, including copies of signed contracts, copies of any payments that have been made on the debt, all of that without necessarily saying that you owe the debt. You don't want to reaffirm the debt. You want to ask questions about the debt and have the debt collection agency prove to you that the amount is accurate. Another thing to consider is what is called time barred debt. So in Maryland, debts have to be collected within a certain time. Outside of that time, which is called the statute of limitations, the debt collector cannot take you to court to collect this debt. Now, we're not giving legal advice, but generally speaking, the creditor has around 3 years or 4 years if the debt is owed for a sale of goods from the day the debt was due in order to take you to court to try and sue you and get this debt to be paid. Outside of that time frame, 3 years or 4 years, it means that the debt is time barred. The creditor cannot take you to court in order to collect on that debt. So some ways to handle debt if you need assistance in assessing how much debt you accurately owe and how you can create a payment plan to deal with that debt. One option are called debt management plans. These plans, and you want to make sure you're choosing where you get this debt management plan very carefully. There are nonprofit credit counseling agencies, such as GreenPath, that can help consumers in creating a debt management plan. What happens is the nonprofit credit counseling agency contacts your creditors and they ask for fees and interest to be negotiated. They try to get that reduced for you. They will help you create a spending plan. Then what they will see is how much debt is left, and they will combine the debt from multiple different creditors, if you have them, and help you come up with a monthly payment, generally speaking, for about 4 years or 48 months. You pay the same amount of money every single month to, again, the nonprofit credit counseling agency. They then pay your creditors the amount that they have agreed upon. So that is a way of combining all of the debt that you owe, getting into a plan that this credit counseling agency has ensured that with your current financial situation, you will be able to continue to make those payments. And after 48 months, the debt will all be repaid. So the original amount of debt is usually getting repaid. Again, the interest and fees have been reduced, but the original amount of debt is getting repaid. And because of that, it is reported favorably on your credit report. However, there are often advertisements, typically late at night. Sometimes I've seen them actually advertising in little yard signs on the street that are called debt settlement companies. The advertisements that I typically see with these type of companies, again, these are companies, not nonprofit credit counseling agencies. They're advertising that we can get rid of your debt, we can get it for pennies on the dollar that you owe, and that they can actually fix your credit report by getting the negative information off of it. There have been a lot of consumer complaints against these debt settlement companies, and they've ranged from the debt settlement company getting money from the consumer to repay debts and never ever paying those debts. So they just kept the money. That's kind of on the extreme end. Other complaints have been they asked for money up front before they did any kind of work. And because of that, this type of company is very risky for a consumer. The Federal Trade Commission put legislation in place because of the number of consumer complaints that were filed with them, so that there is regulations now on debt settlement companies. So the first thing a debt settlement company will probably do with the consumer is ask them to stop paying any creditors that they have. That immediately puts the credit report in a negative situation and drops a person's credit score. They ask them to put the money into a savings. When it gets to a certain amount, they then take on the consumer as a customer and negotiate with creditors for a lump sum of debt that they will take to settle this. But the federal regulations now in place say that the debt settlement companies cannot charge a fee before they actually conduct services. Again, these are really risky types of companies. The original amount of debt is not being repaid, and it is reflected negatively on a person's credit report. In addition, an unexpected event by using a debt settlement company is that typically the money that has not been repaid, the original amount of money that's owed that is not being paid back, can be considered taxable income, and that creditor will send the consumer a paper at tax time, and the consumer has to claim that money on their taxes and pay taxes on it. So these companies are not the consumer friendly or consumer protected way to deal with debt. A nonprofit credit counseling agency is a much better option. So if a consumer has a certain amount of debt compared to their income, it's potential that bankruptcy might be a right solution. So two referrals for you to consider if this is something you would like to explore is, again, Green Path Financial Wellness, which is a nonprofit credit counseling agency, or the Maryland Legal Aid Association. Either of those can help you in assessing if bankruptcy is appropriate. So again, I thank you for your time today to watch this video. If you have questions, please feel free to email me at sue@cashmd.org. Please feel free to check out our website, www.mdcashacademy.org, for more resources, more assistance. And I hope that you stay safe and that this was helpful.